I stared at my phone, my face circled in red like a bullseye, while my daughter-in-law asked her followers who they'd delete from our family photo. The comments poured in like poison. Each laugh, each cruel remark felt like a slap across my 68-year-old face. So I typed the words that would change everything. The house you're living in isn't your husband's. It's mine. 1,000. And I just voted to erase you from my property. If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me where you're tuning in from. Because here's how it all began. Me, sitting in my car outside the place everyone believed was my son's home, clutching the deed that said otherwise. It started with what should have been a celebration. David, my 42-year-old son, had just earned a big promotion at his accounting firm. Stephanie, his wife of 15 years, decided it deserved a family photo to announce online. Because that's how things work now. If it isn't posted, it doesn't count. Martha, stand over there. Stephanie ordered, pointing me to the edge of the group. Not Mom Martha like she used to say, but just Martha, with that clipped tone she'd perfected lately, like I was staff, not family. I did as I was told, watching her fuss over David and their two teenagers, Emma and Josh, placing them at the center like the perfect little unit. I was the extra piece, the one that didn't fit her picture, perfect frame. She took dozens of shots, nitpicking everyone. David, tilt your head. Emma, smile wider. Josh, put the phone away. But when her eyes landed on me, she only sighed, as though my presence drained the air. The final photo turned out stunning. David looked sharp in his suit. The kids could have been in a magazine. Stephanie glowed with satisfaction. Even I appeared decent, smiling genuinely, though slightly apart. What I didn't know then was how she'd used that photo against me. 3 days later, my neighbor Carol stormed over, her face flushed. Martha, honey, you need to see this. She shoved her phone into my hands. There it was. Our family photo, but my face was circled in thick red marker. The caption read family game. If you could erase one person from this picture, who would you choose? I think you know my pick. My stomach dropped. I scrolled through the replies. Each one another wound. Definitely the old lady. She doesn't belong. Time for the nursing home. Stephanie was reacting with laughing emojis and hearts, feeding off the cruelty. My humiliation had become her entertainment. In that moment, a memory hit me hard. 12 years ago, when they were drowning in debt, Frank and I, back when my husband was alive, decided to help. With his mother's inheritance, we bought that very house outright. We put it in my name, for David's protection. Back then, it felt wise, even generous. David and Stephanie moved in, thrilled. For years they paid a little rent, just enough for taxes and upkeep. After Frank died, I even stopped charging. Your family, I'd told them. That's what family does. But slowly, my role in the story faded. Stephanie introduced me as David's mom, who helped with the house. Then, the mom who gave us money. Over time, the truth vanished. People believed David had bought the home himself. I never corrected anyone. It wasn't about credit. It was about family. But now, staring at those hateful comments, I saw how thoroughly I'd been erased. Then came the phone call. David's name lit up my screen, and for a fleeting second I thought, finally, he's defending me. Mom. His voice was tight. We need to talk. What you commented on Stephanie's post was inappropriate. The world tilted. David, did you even see her post? She asked people who to erase, and she circled me. It was just a joke, Mom. But claiming you own our house, that crossed a line. Just a joke. My public humiliation was just a joke. I took a slow breath. David, I do own that house. My name is on the deed. Remember. Silence. Then, coldly. That was different. You bought it for us. This is our home. No, I said evenly. It's been your home in my house. What are you threatening to do? He asked. A day ago, I wouldn't have had an answer. But today, after being mocked by my own family, I knew. I'm not threatening anything. I'm clarifying facts. Your wife seems confused about who owns what. His voice dropped. You're being vindictive. I'm being accurate. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I drove to my house, used my key, and walked right through the door. Martha. Stephanie's voice snapped from the kitchen. sharp and uneasy. "What are you doing here?" "I live here," I said simply, scanning the furniture, the paint, the decorations that made it look so unlike mine. David rushed in, his face flushed. "Mom, you can't just come in anymore. This is our home." "Actually," I replied, "it's mine. You live in it." The kids appeared in the doorway, wide-eyed, while Stephanie hissed at them to go upstairs. David lowered his voice. "Mom, you can't use the house like a weapon. Please, let's figure this out." But I wasn't playing peacekeeper anymore. "The house thing is already official, David. It's been official for 12 years. The only thing that's changed is me pretending otherwise." The next morning, I sat in Robert Patterson's office, the lawyer who had once handled Frank's estate. He flipped through the papers, nodding. "Martha, legally, you're on solid ground, but practically, this could get messy." Robert adjusted his glasses, studying me carefully. "Martha, your son and daughter-in-law have lived in that house for 12 years. They've made improvements, built their lives there. While they have no legal ownership, they may argue for what's called equitable interests. Claims for compensation for upgrades, relocation time, or even first rights if you decide to sell." I pictured the remodeled kitchen, the basement turned into a den. The deck David had hammered together 2 summers ago. So what do I actually owe them for those changes? For the first time since I'd arrived, Robert's lips curved into a faint smile. "Very little, if anything. They made those upgrades without your written consent. And since they've neither paid rent nor property taxes, their standing is weak. You could legally ask them to leave with the proper notice. Then it's possible." I murmured. "Yes," he said, leaning forward, his voice softening. "But Martha, you must ask yourself, is this truly what you want? It could destroy your relationship with David." I thought about Stephanie's cruel post, the strangers mocking me, my son calling me vindictive for stating facts. My throat tightened. "Maybe that relationship is already gone," I whispered. Robert slid a clean legal pad in front of him. "Tell me then. What do you want?" For the next hour, we outlined every possibility: eviction, sale, a new lease at market rent, or even transferring the deed to David, if I chose. Then, just as we were closing, Robert opened another folder. "There's something else. When Frank inherited from his mother 12 years ago, it wasn't just cash. He also set up a trust for David, with you as the trustee." I blinked. "A trust?" "Yes. It's been compounding for years. As of last month, it holds just over $400,000. The air left my lungs. David had a fortune sitting quietly under my care, money I'd barely thought about as I authorized the bank to reinvest. Frank had intended it for David's future, to be revealed at 45 or upon my passing. David would turn 43 next month. A plan began forming, not revenge, but something sharper, an answer to years of disrespect and entitlement. "Robert," I said slowly, "I think I know exactly what to do." 3 days later, I was ready. In reviewing my finances, I stumbled across something else. Something darker. For 2 years, small, regular charges had been slipping onto my credit card. The $50 here, $30 there. Streaming services, apps, small online orders. Nothing big enough to trip alarms, but enough to add up. When I traced the charges, they all led back to Stephanie's phone. She'd been stealing from me. With Carol's help, I pieced it together. I always wondered how she could afford those handbags. My neighbor said, shaking her head as we sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by bank statements. "David's a good accountant, but those purses cost more than my mortgage." The deeper I dug, the uglier it got. Stephanie's real estate records showed only 3 closed deals in 2 years. Her income was almost non-existent. Yet she paraded spa visits, designer bags, and fine dining on Instagram, funded by more than 8,000 of my money, the very same woman who circled my face online for strangers to laugh at. My phone buzzed just as I finished photographing the evidence. "Stephanie." Her voice was thinner now. "Martha, we need to talk. David and I discussed the house. We'll start paying fair rent immediately." "How generous?" I replied, eyes scanning the charges spread before me. "And how exactly do you plan to afford it?" A pause. "What do you mean?" I mean, I said evenly, your commissions barely cover pocket change. David makes $60,000 a year. On $90,000 combined income, how do you explain your lifestyle? The handbags, the spa days, the dinners. The silence on the line stretched long. Finally, her voice came back brittle. I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying, I said coolly. I'm stating facts. Facts like $8,000 in unauthorized charges to my credit card. More silence. Then, barely audible, I can explain those. I'm sure you can. I cut in. Just like you could explain humiliating the woman whose money you were stealing. She tried again. I never meant to. No. I interrupted. You never meant to get caught. When I hung up, a strange calm settled over me. For the first time in years, I felt in control. The next day Robert and I would set my plan in motion. Tonight, I slept soundly. The next morning brought a surprise. Emma, my 17-year-old granddaughter, knocked on my apartment door. Her eyes red from crying but her jaw set with resolve. Grandma Martha, I need to tell you something, she said, sinking into a chair with more gravity than a teenager should carry. I poured her coffee, watching how grown she'd become. What is it, sweetheart? Mum's been lying. About everything. Emma's voice shook. I overheard her last night. She wasn't sorry about the credit card. She was furious you caught her. My heart ached. What else, darling? Emma pulled out her phone, hands trembling. Text messages between Stephanie and her sister Karen filled the screen. Plots to finally get the old lady out. Complaints about David being too soft. And the worst one, weeks before the post. Posted the perfect thing today. Time to show Martha exactly where she stands in this family. The post hadn't been a careless joke. It was calculated cruelty. She's also been telling people you've been charging us rent secretly, and that you're pushing us out because you need money. Emma added, disgust in her voice. I looked at her, seeing both David's kindness and Frank's steel in her eyes. Emma, whatever happens with your parents, my love for you and Josh doesn't change. I know, Grandma, she whispered. But I also know right from wrong. And what Mom did was wrong. That afternoon, Robert called again. His voice was heavy. Martha, there's a new complication. David filed for adverse possession of the house. The words chilled me. What does that mean? It means he's arguing that, since they've lived there openly for 12 years, made improvements, and you allowed it, they now have legal claim to ownership. The good news is in this state, the requirement is 20 years, not 12. Relief washed over me, quickly replaced by fury. My own son was trying to steal my house. And there's more, Robert continued. They've hired Margaret Stevens. She's very expensive. David can't afford her on his salary. Then how are they paying? I asked. That's the question, Robert said grimly. If it's through fraudulent means, we'll have them cornered. I hung up and looked around my modest apartment. The one I'd chosen so they could live comfortably in my house. The house they now tried to take from me. Well, two could play at legal chess. The confrontation came sooner than expected. David showed up at my door the next evening. For a moment, I saw the little boy who used to pick dandelions and proudly call them flowers. But the man standing there now was hard, his jaw tight. Mom, he said firmly, we need to end this madness. But his voice carried no conviction. I agree completely, I answered, stepping aside to let him in. The madness of your wife stealing my credit card. The madness of you trying to take my home through adverse possession. The madness of humiliating the woman who gave you everything. David flinched at each accusation. It doesn't have to be this way. We can work something out. You mean like the arrangement, where you lived rent-free in my house for 5 years? I shot back. That was different. You offered. And you repaid my generosity by letting your wife commit fraud and trying to take what isn't yours. I cut in. David dropped into my armchair, shoulders sagging, looking far older than his 42 years. She said it was the only way to protect us. That you were unstable, that you might try to take the house away without warning. So the solution was to disgrace me publicly, and then attempt to steal my home. When you say it like that, It sounds insane. It is insane, David. She's convinced you I'm the enemy, while she's been robbing me blind for 2 years. For a moment, hesitation flickered across his face. But then his phone buzzed. He read the text, and the doubt vanished. Stephanie says you've been spreading lies to Emma, turning the kids against her. I haven't said a word to Emma. She sees the truth for herself. David stood abruptly. Look, here's the deal. We'll pay you $2,000 a month in rent, fair market value. In exchange, you drop this nonsense about fraud. And if I don't, then we'll see you in court. Stephanie's attorney believes we have a strong adverse possession case, $1,000, and she's prepared to argue that your recent behavior proves you're unfit to manage property. The threat hung between us like smoke. They wanted to have me declared incompetent. David, I said softly. Do you remember when you were 8 and you broke Mrs. Henderson's window with your baseball? His brow furrowed. Yeah. You came home crying, terrified of what would happen. Do you remember what I told you? You said breaking the window was an accident, but lying about it would be a choice. And what did we do? We went together, and I apologized. I offered to pay for the window with my allowance. I nodded. That day you learned that taking responsibility makes you a good man. What you're doing now isn't an accident, David. It's a choice. When he left, silence settled heavy around me. I thought of the boy who once understood right from wrong, and I wondered when that clarity had slipped away. The next discovery came from an unexpected alley. Josh, my 15-year-old grandson, called while his parents were at their lawyer's office. Grandma, I found something in Mom's office. Can you pick me up? 20 minutes later, I parked outside the house I still legally owned. Josh rushed down the driveway clutching a manila folder. What is it? I asked as he climbed into the car. Mom's been keeping records, he said, opening the folder. Inside were bank statements, credit applications, even printouts of my social media. I stared, stunned. Stephanie had been tracking every detail of my life, finances, online activity, even notes about my health taken from public posts. Josh, where did you find this? In her desk. The folder was labeled M. Jenkins Strategy. And there's more. She's been applying for credit cards in your name. Ice flooded my veins. Josh showed me copies of applications bearing my name and social security number, but with Stephanie's phone and email. How many? I whispered, 6 so far, and look at this. He handed me a page of calculations. She's planning to max them all out, and then claim identity theft when the bills arrive. I gripped the folder, horrified. Stephanie wasn't just stealing from me. She was constructing an entire scheme to ruin me financially. Josh's voice dropped. There's something else. She's been recording your calls. Selden. He showed me the app on her phone. Every conversation I'd had with David over the past 6 months saved to Stephanie's cloud. She told Dad that if you caused trouble, she'd use the recordings to prove you were forgetful, unstable. That you were losing your mind. The manipulation was breathtaking in its detail. Almost impressive, almost. Josh, I need copies of everything. Already done, he said, holding up his phone. I photographed every page. I reached over and squeezed his hand. This isn't your fault. You've been braver than most adults. That evening, I called Robert. His response was sharp and immediate. Martha, this is serious. We're talking identity theft, wire fraud, conspiracy. Stephanie could face years in prison. And David, did he know? We'll find out, but there's something else. You remember that attorney they hired, Margaret Stevens? Her retainer alone was $50,000. Where did they get that kind of money? My chest tightened. If they used fraudulent credit for legal fees, Robert said grimly, that's another felony. As I hung up, I realized Stephanie had made her biggest mistake. She had documented her own crimes so thoroughly that denial was impossible. The next morning brought the final blow. In Robert's office, a forensic accountant named Patricia Wells spread documents across the table. Mrs. Jenkins, she said, your son and daughter-in-law have been busier than we thought. She pulled out a thick folder. 6 months ago, They created Jenkins Property Management LLC. On paper, it looks legitimate. In reality, it's a funnel for fraud. They've taken out loans using your property as collateral 3 times in the past year. My head spun. How is that even possible? Robert leaned forward. Because David had access to family documents your late husband kept. He's been forging your signature. Patricia continued. They've borrowed $230,000 against your house. That money paid Stephanie's lawyer, their lifestyle. Most shocking, another property. A Florida condo, purchased for $120,000 cash. I sat frozen. While I lived modestly in my apartment, they had used my house like a personal ATM, funding a secret vacation home. And there's more, Patricia said. The trust fund your husband set up for David. Someone's been withdrawing from it. $40,000 in the past year, using power of attorney documents. But I never gave David power of attorney over that trust. I whispered. No, Robert said gravely. You only gave him medical power of attorney when you had surgery last year. The room went silent as the weight of the truth sank in. For over a year, my own son, the boy I'd raised to know right from wrong, had been stealing from me, forging my name, and draining my accounts. What are my options? I finally asked. Robert and Patricia exchanged a knowing glance. We can press charges right away, Robert said. Bank fraud, identity theft, forgery, elder abuse. The evidence is solid. I waited. There was more. Or, Patricia added, we can show them the evidence and give them a chance to repay what they took, while helping us undo the fraud. I thought of David's threats to declare me incompetent. I thought of Stephanie's cruel posts, her calculated attempts to destroy my credibility. How long would they face in prison? I asked. David could get 5 to 7 years. Patricia replied. Stephanie, 10 to 15. She was the one orchestrating most of it. I closed my eyes, picturing Emma and Josh. Both parents in federal prison. What would that do to them? But then another thought cut deeper. My own son had betrayed me while planning to strip me of my independence. I want to see them, I said at last. Both of them. Here. Tomorrow. Martha. Robert warned, once this comes out, there's no going back. There's already no going back, I told him. That line was crossed the day they chose to steal from me. The next morning, David and Stephanie walked into Robert's office as if it were a routine meeting. David wore his best suit. Stephanie a designer dress I now realized I had unknowingly paid for. I hope this means you've come to your senses about the house, Stephanie said smoothly, settling in with rehearsed confidence. Oh, I've come to my senses, I replied, watching Robert lay down the first stack of documents. David's face turned pale at the sight of the forged loan applications. Stephanie lasted only moments longer before her own mask cracked as she spotted the fraudulent credit cards. This is a misunderstanding, David stammered. Is it? I asked, steady. Explain how you accidentally forged my signature 3 different times, using my house as collateral. Stephanie jumped in, voice sharp and accusatory. You're just a sick old woman trying to tear apart your own family. By stealing $400,000 from me, I asked quietly. The number froze the room. Patricia had calculated it: the fraudulent loans, the stolen trust fund, the credit cards, the vacation condo. That's not what happened, David muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. Then tell me. I pressed. How you accidentally opened a business with my property. Or how you accidentally bought a Florida condo using my equity. We were protecting ourselves? Stephanie snapped. You're getting old. Making bad decisions. Someone had to think about the future. So you decided to steal mine to secure yours, I said. Robert cleared his throat. You need to understand. This isn't just a family squabble. This is bank fraud, identity theft, elder abuse, conspiracy, federal crimes, long prison sentences. David finally broke. Mom, please. I never meant it to go this far. Stephanie said it was temporary, that we'd pay it back once the business took off. What business? I asked. The property company, he said weakly. The fake one you created to launder stolen money. It wasn't fake, he insisted. We were going to make it real. I studied his face, searching for the boy who once owned up to breaking a neighbor's window. David, do you remember what I taught you about responsibility? This is different, he whispered. No, it's exactly the same. You broke something. Now you have to choose whether to own it or keep lying. Stephanie leaned forward, venom dripping. You think you're so righteous, but you're just a lonely old woman who can't stand that her son has his own life. I am a lonely old woman, I said calmly. But I'm one who still owns 400,000 worth of property you've been stealing from. And I'm one who can look in the mirror without shame. Robert slid the final paper across the table. Here are the terms: full repayment, immediate move out, shutdown of the fake business, and cooperation in reversing all fraud. In return, no criminal charges. And if we refuse? David asked. Then charges are filed today. Arrests by the weekend. How long do we have? Until 5 o'clock. At 4:30, my phone rang. David's voice was hollow. We accept. Mom, we'll sign. 3 weeks later, I stood in my kitchen, making coffee. David and Stephanie were gone, the condo sold, the loans repaid, the trust fund restored. Emma showed up at the door, carrying a box. How are you, Grandma? I'm good. How are you and Josh adjusting? She shrugged. Smaller place, but honest. Dad's been different since all this. More like himself again. I smiled. I did know. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to remember who you really are. Come for dinner Sunday? I asked. Her face lit with the first real smile I'd seen in months. Only if you make your famous pot roast. Later, I walked through the house with new eyes. It was mine again. Not just the building, but the peace inside it. No more lies. No more manipulation. That evening I sat on the porch with tea, watching the sky glow gold and violet. My phone buzzed a memory from 4 years ago. Frank and me, same porch, celebrating 40 years together. He was smiling at the camera. I was smiling at him. I shared it with a caption. Sometimes you have to fight for what matters. Peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the presence of justice. Within an hour, comments poured in, neighbors, friends, strangers. But the one that mattered most was from Emma. Love you, Grandma. Thank you for showing us that integrity isn't negotiable. I set my phone down and let the night settle around me. The house was quiet, but not empty. It was filled with truth, and truth, I had learned, is the most comforting thing you can live with. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and share your story in the comments. Your voice matters. I leaned forward. How messy.